Afade, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're calling in from right now across the world. My name is Nicole Cavell. Welcome to Pacific Historic Parks History Talk series. I will be your host for this morning here in Guam. And Pacific Historic Parks, or PHP as we like to call ourselves, is the lead organization supporting significant historical sites in the Pacific for future generations. We are a nonprofit cooperating association with the National Park Service that provides support to 4 national parks and 1 state park. These parks are Pearl Harbor National Monument, Kalaupapa National Historical Park, and Diamond Head State Monument in the state of Hawaii, American Memorial Park in Saipan, and Warren the Pacific National Historical Park right here in the island of Guam. The mission of Pacific Historic Parks is to support the USS Arizona Memorial and other Pacific historic locations through education, interpretive programs, research, preservation, and restoration to perpetuate the memory of events and honor the people involved in these sites. This History Talk series is made possible with funding provided to Pacific Historic Parks from Humanities Guahan and the National Endowment for the Humanities as part of the Federal ARP Act of 2021. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items for today's presentation. First, we ask that you remain on mute for the duration of the history talk. If you have any questions during the presentation, we ask that you utilize the chat feature, and you can go ahead and enter your questions into the person that says questions, or the box that says questions. Our team will be monitoring the chat, and all questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Finally, the History Talks presentation today will be recorded, and the recording will be made available to our social media channels for you to share or rewatch at a later time. Our guest speaker for today is Jillette Leon Guererro. With her passion for historical research, especially as it relates to Guam, she has provided historical consulting services for Guampedia, the Warren the Pacific National Historical Park, and various Guam organizations. She received her bachelor's degree in anthropology from the University of Guam, her master's in human relations from the University of Oklahoma, a certificate in genealogical research from Boston University, and she is currently working towards a master's degree in genealogical, paleographic, and heraldic studies at Strathclyde University in Scotland. In addition, LeonGuerrero is active in multiple community service organizations and is the president of Guamology Incorporated, a Guam-based publishing company that promotes knowledge about the history, culture, art, and society of Guam. So without further delay, I welcome Ms. Jillette Leon Guererro as she presents Landscape and Memory, the Case of the Padre Palomo District and Involuntary Dislocation After World War II in Guam. Jillette, thank you very much, and take it away.
Thank you, Nicole. And I'd like to also thank the Pacific Historic Parks for giving me this opportunity to share some of this initial research on the Padre Palomo district. Much like a smell, a sight, a feeling against our skin, or a particular sound, a landscape can bring a memory back in an instant. What is it then when we visit a place for the first time and a strong feeling of nostalgia comes over us, or we experience deja vu? Could this be the remnants of memories from our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents present in our DNA? Could this explain the depth of attachment some of us feel to a place? When people share the same experience, a connection is established among them. Guam's history of tragedy and hardship seems to bring out traditional values of inafamaulit, respectu, geftau, familian, and chinchuli. Expressions of these values are present in the earliest written accounts of the Mariana Islands. These values connect us to our past and to one another today. They are inclusive. I believe these are what tie us to our island home and what gives meaning to it. It appears that this connection to landscape is not unique to Guam. Professor Ken Taylor of the Australian National University wrote, "One of our deepest needs is for a sense of identity and belonging. A common denominator in this is human attachment to landscape and how we find identity in landscape and place. Landscape and memory are inseparable because landscape is a nerve center of our personal and collective memories." Another scholar, Dr. Bambang of Indonesia, expressed how critical a sense of place is for people. He believes a sense of place, and identity are tied up in everyday places that can give ordinary people meaning and value. The activities of everyday people can create a rich cultural tapestry of life. This is something That was not considered by leaders after World War II, when many were not allowed to return to their homes and landscapes they had lived most of their lives. One such place was the Padre Palomo district of Agaña. During the Spanish administration of the island, there were 8 barrios or districts of Agaña, and you can see them here. These were the traditional districts. The top right is San Antonio. Padre Palomo district was originally a part of San Antonio, but when the Americans came in, they renamed it about 1930, maybe 1929. The district of Padre Palomo was designated by the US naval government, and it was named in commemoration of Padre Jose Bernardo Palomo, the first Chamorro ordained as a Roman Catholic priest. He was a learned man and spoke Chamorro, Spanish, English, French, and Carolinian, and he played a significant role in the island's transition from a Spanish administration to the US naval government. Padre Palomo, as he was known, was beloved by the people of Guam, and so respected by the community that the naval leadership of the islands complained that the local community would do nothing until they had consulted the Padre. In 1909, he was granted the title of the Very Reverend Monsignor by Pope Pius X, but to this day, he is still referred to affectionately as Padre Palomo. Padre Palomo died on the 5th of July, 1919. And as I said earlier, the area was formerly part of the San Antonio barrio and is referred to both as the Padre Palomo district and as San Antonio, depending on what document you're looking at. And I've outlined in green the boundaries of the area. You can see here, it's basically from the traffic light where Route 8 is and follows that. So it's a relatively small area. And this is something I thought you needed to know. There was a big change in the official districts of Guam between 1930 and 1940. In 1930, there were only 8 administrative districts. And as you can see, Agaña took up almost half the island. In 1940, it was changed to 15. Agaña, which was previously half the island, was reduced to a tiny village, and it was subdivided into 11 sections. Mainly the traditional names were followed: Santa Cruz, Anigua, Hulali, San Ignacio, Togay, San Ramon, San Nicolas, San Antonio. And then the 2 that were named by the Navy were Dr. Sargent area, which is kind of where the federal court is, that sort of area there, and then the Padre Jose Palomo district. The other new district boundaries included Sinahaña, which was formerly part of Agaña, which also encompassed the areas of Mongmong Toto and Maiti, Ordat, and Chalampago. That was all, and Agaña Heights. All of that was Sinahaña. Dedido included the area we now know as Tamuning. Barragata extended to the east coast, including Mangilao, and Jigo and Machanao were the last part of the island. And let me see, sorry. Yes, that's what I wanted to say. This map shows you a little better of the division today. So Machanao, which was formerly a district, is now divided between Jigo and Dedido, depending on where it's at. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with this. Okay, so Padre Palomo, this is a picture today, is mainly a seaside village. The area extends, I think I clocked it, it's about a half mile long, which was not very long, not very, it's really not very big. And it extends back to the tree line, except for by the road, by Route 8, some of the houses went up the hill a little bit. Today, this area is bordered by auto dealerships, coffee shops, rental companies, and strip malls. And it retains very little of the community that it once housed. And while the area commemorates Padre Palomo, and memorial cemeteries located in the district remind us of military veterans of past wars and the first Chamorro Protestant missionaries, The community that lived in this district prior to the war is not memorialized in any way. No one would be hard pressed to find vestiges of this neighborhood, which is now covered in blacktop. Why is this? Okay. This is a photo that is before the war. I think it's before the war, maybe shortly, maybe it's a reconnaissance picture photo, I'm not sure. This is an image of Padre Palomo School. So that gives you an idea. You can see the intersection of where it goes up to. I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on. Okay. According to the census, there were 349 residents and 56 households living in the Padre Palomo district in 1930. By 1940, there were 653 residents and 99 households. That's about a 47% increase in the population. This is a picture, a 1941 photo of Padre Palomo Street near the eastern limits of Agaña, and you can see that the thatched houses. Laura Thompson, an anthropologist and author of Guam and Its People, first published in 1941, gives this description of life in pre-war Guam. The clock strikes 5. Feet shuffle down the road, a bull cart small and low behind a monster carabao creaks by. Before light reddens the eastern sky, the exodus to the farms begin. Men in blue denim, shirts hanging outside worn trousers, start their day hiking along the roads which radiate from town toward the garden lands. All night, the closed-set pile huts lining the narrow streets have been shut tightly against the night air, prowlers of the dreaded Tatamona. Presently, as if by magic, wooden shutters are raised, babies cry and sleepy children peer from open windows. Touched by the first warm rays of the sun, the whole town awakens. As sounds of the life muffle the beat of the surf, 11,000 natives begin their daily tasks. Smoke rising through the thatch, trails in the faint breeze. Families gather for morning prayers. Children carry tins of water from hydrants to their mothers, busy preparing breakfast on raised open hearths. Soon the sun is bathing the town in warmth and light. School bells call neat children into the big white buildings. Sleek-haired native clerks and young women dressed in American styles are going to work. Older women wear Filipina dresses with great starched sleeves embroidered to match the pattern on their skirt. At 8, the school children exercise on the palm fringed plaza to the tune of the military band. Naval officers appear at their desks, and the raising of the colors marks the formal opening of the day. This is an image by local artist Judy Flores, who created this image from my father's description. She revised it as he requested and got it until he was satisfied that it was correct. And he says that this is very accurate. So it was made out of EFIT. The entire house was made out of EFIT. And it was a very spacious home, and it was located across the street from the beach. And it was located in the middle of Marine Corps Drive in front of Auto Spa. So they bulldozed all those houses if they weren't destroyed after the war. But Dad's playground was a beach, the jungle behind his house, and the homes of his friends and relatives. He lived a short walk from his maternal grandparents, who lived on Padre Palomo Street in San Antonio, just a little bit further down. The family had a large outdoor kitchen with a wood stove and good-sized shower and outhouse. The bodega of their house was large enough to house a punching bag for Dad's older cousin, who was a boxer. He didn't live in the house, but he came over to practice. And the second floor had held bedrooms for the girls and my dad's parents, but the boys, they got to sleep in the living room floor. And like most families of this era, the family was an economic unit. Everyone contributed to the well-being of the family. Tata, who was Ignacio Ferran Leon Guerrero, and his oldest son, Juan Torre Leon Guerrero, managed the family ranch in Machinao. In addition, Tata also worked for the Navy, cutting timber. Nana, who was Vicenta Ada de la Torre, ran the household. She also made potu, or steamed rice, for the children to sell to neighbors to make extra money. And I also remember my grandmother's sisters making shell purses when I was young. I think that cottage industries were alive and well and not reflected in the census records. That everyone, even the children, had their chores. This is a table of the surnames that are found in the Padre Palomo district in 1930 and 1940. So you can see that there was some mobility within Guam at the time. At least 26 families moved into the district in 1940 and 15 families moved out. From my initial research, it appears that many of them just moved to other places in Agaña. And of course, some passed away. Some were in the military, joined the military. So this is early days for this research. There's a lot of people to look at. So I'll be trying to follow many of these people here. According to the 1940 census, these are the occupations of residents in the district at the time. And as I've mentioned, there are other occupations that were probably not mentioned, cottage industries. And most families had small gardens and perhaps large ranches located elsewhere. My dad's family had hectares of land in Machinao that they farmed. But the people there were skilled tradesmen, business owners, service workers, educators, healthcare workers, few occupied with military service. There was a variety of work, and some women also worked. From oral history, we know that the community was a network of people helping each other. They bartered among themselves for services and products and helped each other in time of need. The family produced what they needed or traded what they had to acquire what they lacked. They celebrated together on feast days and came out in the streets as wedding parties passed by and visited during feast days and other celebrations and mourned together for the loss of family, friends, and neighbors. The district did not have a church, so the residents walked to the church in San Antonio or a bit further to the cathedral. And this is a photo of a pre-war barbershop in Agaña. My father says it was near the old Martinez ice plant. There was a barbershop in the Padre Palomo district, and I'll show that on a map a little bit later. And this is an image just to show that the family really was an economic unit pre-war. They all worked together and contributed. This is not Padre Palomo area, but I felt that it illustrated the family working together. Okay, this is a Padre Palomo school, which was dedicated in 1930. It taught students from the 1st to the 4th grade. In 1931, the school had an enrollment of 380 students with 12 teachers, with students attending in the morning. Later, afternoon classes were held, and by 1940, the afternoon session had added 5 more teachers. And an interesting thing that I found was that the cooking class made made soup or cocoa and sold it for 1 cent. And they sold over 500 cups of soup a day. And in addition to academics, the school also taught gardening. The school must have been the center of a lot of community activity because they held school fairs and competitions, an annual Christmas program. These activities must have certainly attracted nearby residents because there was no TV and other things to do. It is believed that the U.S. Naval Cemetery in Agaña was established in 1899. And the first burial was reportedly a private Elwood Hopkins in 1902, and the last burial was in 1954. The cemetery contains at least 254 burials and is a final resting place for veterans of the Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, and the Korean conflict. Men and women of various nationalities, including Chamorro, German, Italian, and American. It is the first non-sectarian cemetery on Guam and is on the National Register of Historic Places. The second picture is showing nurses. I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on. Showing nurses placing flowers on the graves. This is a Costino Cemetery, which is right across the street from the Naval Cemetery. It commemorates the first Chamorro Protestant missionaries, brothers Louis and Joseph Costino, who were born Castro, but they had returned to the island in 1899 after the Spanish-American War. They had left on a whaling ship during the Spanish administration and had settled in Hawaii. There were 33 readable burials between 1930 and 1940, and the first Chamorro pastor was Joaquin Flores Sablan, who is buried there. And the earliest grave is for 4 Flores brothers who all died before the age of 2 between 1908 and 1918. The last one probably died in the epidemic, the Spanish flu epidemic. Okay, the US Census for the Padre Palomo district for the years 1930 and 1940, along with the 1941 tax rolls, gives us information on the residents of the district. This is some preliminary research that I did, just picking out some lots. So lot 1065 was owned by Benigno Camacho Manabusan, who was a 49-year-old blacksmith in 1940. He owns his home is situated right along the beach next to Agaña Bay and adjacent to the Padre Palomo School. He was a head of a household that was comprised of his wife, Joaquina Blas, 4 sons, Juan 20, Antonio 18, Edward 14, and Pedro 8. 3 daughters, Maria 12, Lourdes 10, Rosa 6. His uncle, Pedro Camacho Cruz, who was 68, and his aunt, Natividad Camacho Cruz, 74, also lived in the household. Directly next door to him was Juan Cruz Quintanilla, who also owned his home. He was 36. He was a 36-year-old day laborer with a wife and 8 children. His wife was Maria Gomez. She was a Filipina, and they had 8 children. Ramon, 15, Isabel, 14, Juan, 12, Jesus, 10, Francisco, 5, Maria, 6, Rosario, 4, and Margarita, 1. And directly adjacent to the Quintanilla family was a Torre family, headed by Jesus Castro Torre, 41, a farmer. His household included his wife, Amparo San Nicolas, and 3 children, Luis, 12, Gregorio, 11, and Maria, 4. He also owned another lot, which was a little further away, lot 1065. It's possible that he, because he was a farmer, that he used that to farm. So then I wanted to put this in perspective to where my family lived. Ignacio Ferhan Leon Guerrero is my grandfather. And he was 44 in 1940, was a farmer, and as I said, worked cutting timber for the Navy on Navy land. His wife, my grandmother, was Vicenta Attatori, and they had 8 children. Dolores, 19, Juan, 17, Leonela, 14, Custo, 12, that's my father. Lourdes, 9, and Hignio, 7, Ignacio, 4, and Juan was just a few months older. In addition to the family home in the Padre Palomo district, the family owned a large tract of land in Machanao, a smaller piece in Barragata. As I said earlier, my tata worked the land in Machanao with my dad's oldest brother, Juan. And directly behind them, on lot 2037, was the home of Justo Cruz Tahaji. And the family lived, he was a 36-year-old, according to the census, and had no occupation, yet he had a live-in servant cook. So I'm not sure what he actually did. But he lived with his wife, Conception, and 6 children, aged 6 months to 12 years. Miguel Cruz Tahaji was a nephew of Justo Tahaji, who visited his uncle often, and he was a little older than my father, but the 2 became good friends. And I have a photo of my father and Miguel later on. Across the street on lot 2002, this map is from 1933, so it obviously was subdivided later. So there's several people that live on this lot, 2002. But Juan Leon Guerrero Perez, 58, he was a widower who worked as a carpenter, and he had 4 children, Maria 19, Remedios 18, Edward 11, and Conception 9. This was a home of Dad's playmates. Remedios and Maria taught my dad to swim, and Edward and my dad got into lots of mischief together from the stories that I've heard. And that was just right across the street. So Juan's brother, Matias Leon Guerrero Perez, was also lived on that lot in a separate household, and he was also a carpenter. He and his wife, Josefa Palomo, lived there, along with Antonio R. Palomo, who was the couple's nephew, and Vicente R. Palomo, who was the brother of Josefa. Vicente was a teacher. Also in the home was 45-year-old Francisco Cachucho, who was listed in the 1940 census as a servant, but whose occupation appears as day laborer. I'm confused about this because usually those that were listed as servants in the census were like extended family, and they were usually much younger. So I'm not sure why he's listed that way. But also on lot 2002 was a family of Jose Castro Torre, 43, a farmer, and he was enumerated in Machinao in 1940, most likely working on the family ranch, but his wife, Gabriela Toves, is enumerated in the district along with their 6 children. Jose, 15, Rosario, 13, Florencia, 8, and Maria, 6, and Tomas, 4, and Gregorio, 2. So it's not unusual. Many times the husbands were enumerated on the ranch while the family stayed in town. And adjacent to lot 2002 and across the street from my grandfather's home was the home of Francisco San Nicolas. He was a 41-year-old Navy man. The family lived on lot 2003-3, and he is enumerated in 1930 and 1940 census along with his wife, Joaquina Guerrero Iglesias, and 7 children, Francisco, 15, Hignio, 14, Sylvia, 12, Maria, 7, Edward, 4, and Priscilla, 2, and Teresita, 1. The homes were very close to each other, and everyone knew everyone. I mean, that was even the case when I first came to Guam in the 1960s. So on the 8th of December, we all know what happened. Guam was bombed by the Japanese and became an active player in World War II. Families fled the district under the direction of the Navy. They went to ranches and homes outside Agaña. My family fled to Machinao, where they lived off the land until liberation. But it was not the devastation from this bombing that destroyed the capital of Agaña. It was the American bombardment in preparation for the retaking of the island from the Japanese in July 1944. This is an image I found of the devastation to a home that looks like that of my father's pre-war home. This is a picture of Agaña. That smokestack you see is the power plant, but you can see the devastation to the city. And this is an image that was taken in July, August of 1944 after the retaking of the island. And you can see this is Agaña, and then a little bit to the north, you can see the area where the road, where you can see Route 8 going up. That is the Padre Palomo district. So residents of Agaña were not allowed to return to their homes. Most were destroyed either by bombing or were destroyed when they were bulldozed to make way for the roads. The majority of the island's people lived in Agaña before the war. After the war, the city's refugees were held in resettlement villages around the island. This is just photos of 3 of the resettlement villages that I could find. Agate, Sinahanya, and Barragata. So the population changes between 1940 and 1950. As you can see, Agaña had a 92% decrease from 791 in 791 in 1950, and 10,004 in 1940. But we have to remember that Agaña was, in 1940, Agaña had already been changed. From 1930, it was half the island, but by 1940, it was one of 15 districts. So Agaña Heights was an area that's actually not in here, but before the war, it was a location for scattered ranches owned by residents of Agaña. So some of the residents of Agaña probably went there. I wasn't able to find anybody, but immediately after the war, this was an area that was used by the U.S. Island Command headquarters. And it was a stockade that held Japanese prisoners. War crimes trials were held there. The court and the stockade were closed in 1949. And it is supposedly the site of the first modern concrete church built on Guam after the war, and the first baseball field in Guam. Sinahaña, before the war, the residents of Sinahaña lived on either side of the road from what was Ace Hardware area to the Butler family buildings. The Catholic Church was in its present location. After the war, the village developed around the church. A large number of refugees from Agaña moved to Sinahaña. You can see it had a 641.8% increase in the population. Actually, the largest population change was in Barragata. Barragata was an agricultural area before the war. The Japanese had taken over in 1943 to plant food for the Japanese soldiers, but many families stayed on their ranches during the war. A large number of former Agaña residents moved there. The first settlement was in Radio Barragata. Residents built homes made of salvaged and local materials. In 1948, private land in parts of Old Agaña was returned to the landowners, although the military retained much of the farmland. Agate, before the war, residents lived in Old Agate and farmed in the outlying areas, including Fena. After the war, the military government took several parts of Agate. In 1944, a refugee camp was created on the Erode Peninsula and along the shore north of Agate, and later moved to Guyan Point. The camp was made up of A-frame homes with 1 or 2 rooms, and refugees were mainly from Sumai, Apra, and Old Agate. Dedido, before the war, sorry, this keeps changing by itself. Before the war, the center of the village was located further south, and the military moved the center to its present location in Liguan, which previously held scattered ranches. Talafofo was an agricultural village before the war. There was a refugee camp that was set up in Talafofo, accommodating 13 families comprised of 105 people in 1944. And then Jonia, before the war, an agricultural village. Meningan refugee camp was located along the Ilig River, southwest of Jonia proper. Living at the camp in September 1944 was as many as 2,800 Chamorros. The date the camp closed is unknown, but one internee claims to have lived there until October of 1944. And what is not here, because there was no population in 1940, is Santa Rita. Of course, before the war, Santa Rita was unoccupied. The land was actually owned by the Berdallo family. The village was built to house the former residents of Sumai, which the Navy took. Initially housed in Erode, the Sumai residents were moved to the Agate refugee camp. And then they were told to move to New Agate when the military wanted to use the area. But there were some old rivalries within that village, and the people demanded another location. So in 1945, the refugee camps were moved to Santa Rita. Half of the people from Sumai moved to Santa Rita, and the other half moved to Mongong Toto area. Laura Thompson was very critical of the naval government's plan to rebuild Guam's ancient and historical capital into an imitation of a small Southern California resort town. They wanted to design it after Santa Monica, rather than according to local traditions and modifications of local house types. She said, Guamanians are an adaptable and ingenious people whose capacity to endure frustration is great. If any people can find ways to solve the naval government's self-created dilemma regarding the rehabilitation of Agaña, the Guamanians are such a people. The naval government turned Agaña over to the local government after the Organic Act was signed. But I know that the master plan for Agaña is still in the works. So the former residents of the Padre Palomo district. This slide, if you're looking at the side, that slide is a picture of my father and Miguel Tahaji in the far right at their 1951 high school graduation. So it was amazing to see where they had lived and then to have this photo of them. And the photo on the left is Francisco Iglesias San Nicolas, who married my dad's sister, Dolores, and that's the picture in the middle. And he was the one that lived across the street from my father. So it shows that there was like all of these networks, and I found family relations between a lot of these people. Next slide, the map. You want that? As you can see this, I just wanted to let you know where these people ended up. Benigno Camacho Manabusan family is not found in the 1950s. Well, he wasn't found in the 1950 census. He's not listed on the dead or the survivors listing. And we know that he died between 1941 and 1950, as he is listed in the 1941 tax rolls, but not the 1950 census. His wife, Joaquina, is found in the 1950 census. She's living in Legend, Barragata, as a widow with her sons, Antonio, 25, who is a tailor, Edward, 24, who is now an engineer, and Pedro, 19, and Rosa, 16. Juan Cruz Quintanilla family is living in Sinajaña, Toto village. He is a plumber working for Public Works, and 5 of his 7 children are living with him. Rosario, who would have been 10 years old in 1950, died during the war and is listed on the memorial wall in Nimitz. Ramon enlisted in the Navy after 1940, and on the 24th of November, 1948, he is transferred to the U.S. Naval Hospital in San Diego for treatment. He must have recovered as he visits Guam in 1952 with a wife and 2 infant children. I imagine that he retired from the military in California because he died there and is buried in Santanella, Merced County, California. Jesus Castro Torre family, who I found out was the second cousin of my grandmother who lived down the street, is not found in the 1950 census for Guam or anywhere in the US. No record of travel is found for the family member, for any of his family members. I couldn't find it anywhere, but the family appears in California in 1977, where I found a death announcement for Jesus, and he is buried in Solana, California. So it's not known when he traveled because I could not find any information on him. But also there lived Jose Castro Torre family. They are found in Sinajaña in 1950, and he's found with his wife and 7 children. He's now a carpenter working in a carpentry shop. His daughter, Rosa, is a typist, clerk typist. And my grandfather, Ignacio Ferran Leon Guerrero, continued to farm in Machinao and work for the naval government, cutting timber and also doing carpentry work. The family moved several times after the war, first to a house in Anigua. It was on land of his cousin. And then they moved to Tamuning, a house in Tamuning that they rented. Then they moved to some land that they had in Manilao. And finally to Tamuning, where they settled and lived for the rest of their lives. But it took them a while to get there. Juan Leon Guerrero Perez, in 1950, the family was split. Juan is living with his daughter, Josefina's family in Derido, and he is working as a carpenter for the naval government. Edward Alvarez Perez and Juan L.G. Perez are his parents, lived with his sister, Maria, and their family in Derrida. Matias Leon-Guerrero Perez lived in Tumuning along with his wife Josefa, who ran a retail store, and nephew Antonio R. Palomo, who managed a restaurant. Matias is not working, doesn't have an occupation at that time. Francisco San Nicolas, across the street, whose son married my dad's sister, dies in service in Pearl Harbor, but just before the war starts. Yeah. So his the family tells me that his body was not returned until after the war, because it was just a few days. He died just a few days before Pearl Harbor was bombed, and he was in Pearl Harbor, which was kind of interesting. Jose Cruz Tahaji is living in East with his wife and 8 children. He is a watchman at a grocery store, and his nephew, my dad's friend, is pictured with him on the previous page at their 1951 graduation party. In doing this research, I learned that Miguel's mother was Candelaria Ada Cruz, the sister of my dad's grandmother, Apollonia Ada. So my dad didn't even know that he and Miguel were related, but they were. So my dad was related to the Leon Guerrero Perez, and of course the Torrey families, and by marriage, the San Nicolas. But I also wanted to show you on this map some business areas. So Bernardo Punzalan, lot 2044, which I don't know if you can see it very well, but he ran a pool room and a barber shop on that area. So there was a barber shop, and I think that must have been what my dad was talking about. And I'm sure that he catered to the military. The Chicanos had lots 1062 and 1067, and they had retail stores. And then there was a Joaquin T. Borja who worked as a storekeeper. I don't know if he worked for the Chicanos or if he had his own little place. And then at lot 2003-1, which is up where you can see the Padre written, was Amparo San Agustin, who was a midwife. And I just thought it was interesting to see that there was a lot of activity going on, and people had, worked together, and there was reason for them to see each other all the time. The seaside community of the Padre Palomo district lives on in the memories of survivors of World War II. I'm one of the lucky ones that can envision what life was like back then from the stories of my father. Hopefully I can pass what I know on to my grandchildren so that they can know the much simpler life that their ancestors lived. The generation that lived through the war and came out the other side exhibited traditional Chamorro values mentioned at the beginning of this slideshow. Inafa Mauli, to make good, to restore order, respect, especially for our elderly, Geftau, generosity, familian, family, Chinchuli, just gifts and donations for no specific event. As I've often said, they are a group of people that takes what life has given them and gets on with it without complaining. World War II tore them from the network of friends, family, and traditions that they had known until then. The coastal landscape that they knew was replaced by urban settings inland. Yet they survived and learned new ways of doing things and made new friends, some in faraway places where they lived the rest of their lives. But I envision that sometimes the memories of those early days of living by the sea return to them and remind them of the deep connections they still hold for a place and a time, if only in their memory. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillette. Thank you for that interesting presentation. There's so much information and history. And I know, technology gets in the way. It's okay. Don't worry about it. This is great. In fact, we're all here this morning. A lot of people are calling in from all over the world, if you will. So that's a wonderful thing. So we do have a few questions that came in through the chat box. First question, Jill. Did all or most of the children in the 1930s attend the Padre Palomo school in Agaña? Or was there another elementary school that other barrios could attend, other children from the other barrios could attend?
You know, actually, I don't know the answer to that. I don't think so. I think there was another school. I would
Okay.
imagine, but I don't know, honestly.
Well, that makes for another history talk then. We just have to do another more research. Love it. Okay. So we have a second question from Michael Castro. What was the most challenging part of assembling all this valuable and insightful information?
Oh, yeah, it's it takes time. Yeah, I think the time element, because some things are not available. So my sources were the 1933 cadastral map, which I was able to get a copy of, that has the whole of Agaña and all of the lots. So that was a starting point. And then, of course, you go to the census documents. And then after the census documents, the 1941 tax rolls, because sometimes the census documents just tell you who lived there, but the tax rolls tell you who owned the property. So it's just assembling like all of this different information and the time that it takes to do it, but it's so interesting. It's just the beginning.
Very good, very good. Thank you for that. So we have a question from Carlos Madrid. He says, great presentation. Thank you for bringing such a pool of information on a piece of the history of Agaña. Thank you also to Pacific Historic Parks for organizing. Sorry, the question to Jillette is, to the east of Padre Palomo district, there was the place named Trinchera. Is it used today? Did you happen to gather any information on what was the use of that area or why the name was given, the Dos Masi? And he said Trinchera, Trinchera.
I haven't come across that name. To the east of
to the east of the Padre Palomo district, there was a place named Trinchera.
No, I haven't. I know I haven't even come across that name.
Okay.
Wait, can you get? Yeah, I'll talk to him later.
Okay, we'll find that out soon, right? Okay, let's see if there are any other questions. Any other questions? Does anyone have a question? You can go ahead. We can unmute you and let's see. Oh, one question here was, is the location of the park at the old school? Or where the park is today, is that the old school? I believe that's what it is.
Yeah, yes, it's the park, and I think yes, but I probably a little, not just the park.
Right. Okay, very good. Another one. Trying to read it. Has the shoreline changed in this area since the war? The shoreline.
No, sorry, I imagine it has, just from the knowledge that I have, but I don't have any scientific evidence to back that up.
Okay, I imagine it's changed as well. So, okay, are there any other questions for Jillette? Let's see, I'm trying to look. Okay, perhaps there aren't. And if there are any questions, you can just go ahead and you can email Pacific Historic Parks or myself or anyone in our team. I think there's one more. Okay, so I think we're good. I just want to say, yes, Jillette, go ahead.
I just see Dominica in the chat said that Dorn School maybe, but she's not sure if that was just for military dependents. There was a Dorn.
Okay.
And try to the location that Carlos mentioned, she says was from a wall Chamorros built when fighting Spanish in the late 1600s.
Right. Oh, good. See, more to know. I love it. Very good. So anyway, I want to say on behalf of Pacific Historic Parks, our board of directors, our management and staff, we'd like to thank you, Jillette Leon Guererro, and all of you who registered and participated in this morning's history talk. This series was made possible again with funding from the Humanities Guahan and the National Endowment for the Humanities as part of the Federal ARP Act of 2021. Please join us in 2 weeks, about December 17th and on Saturday again, as we host our next history talk, the last one for this year, with Father Eric Forbes, who will be talking about Chasing the Enemy, the Guam Combat Patrol. It should make for another great presentation about World War II history in the Marianas. We want to thank you all and have a great weekend. Thank you for participating. Thank you again, Jillette. Adios. Goodbye.